Beyond the Pillion is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we would like to pay our respects to elders, past and present.
Welcome to Beyond the Pillion. My name is Kahiwa Sebire. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the chaotic one.
And my name is Mark Drechsler. I use he, him pronouns, and for all the new writers out there, trust me, you'll only ever sneeze inside an open-faced helmet once. You will never do it twice. Once you've done it once, it's something you'll never, Anyway, today, back to the story.
Welcome to episode 11. Today we are talking about riding in winter and how to make sure you and your bike are ready for anything that the weather can throw at you.
Now is the time of the year that I'm putting a couple of my bikes away under their blankies for winter because a couple of them I don't want to take out and get wet. But I'm also seeing in the shop quite a few people coming in and explicitly getting their bikes serviced, knowing that they are coming into winter. I ride all year round, and the people who do ride all year round are choosing now as a good time to come in and say, yep, get my bike serviced and get it ready because we are coming into the months that are tougher in terms of riding and tougher on motorbikes. So it is a time and we are, of course, talking from an Australian perspective, coming into winter and into the colder and wetter months where you do need to start having a bit more of a think about some of the things around riding. Otherwise, you can have some pretty awful experiences. Kahiwa, what's the worst experiences you've had in terms of wet riding or winter riding so far?
I mean, I'm a pretty fair weather rider, particularly nowadays. And I know certainly when I first started riding, the idea of riding in the rain and in the wet made me quite nervous, actually, and I worried about it quite a bit, particularly because I started on a bike that didn't have ABS. I think now that most bikes have ABS and riding more modern bikes, that's not as much of a fear nowadays. But certainly when I commuted into the city, kind of every day, most days. There were definitely a few when, you'd kind of have a look at the radar in the morning or in the afternoon and it would say to expect rain. And I remember one afternoon, a workmate who also rode quite regularly and I were sitting there just reloading and refreshing the radar, trying to pinpoint when there might be a little gap in between the clouds that we could get out and go. And I think he made it, and I didn't quite add a few more pieces of gear to get changed into. But thankfully it wasn't too bad. I had pretty good gear, like jacket, pants, gloves, proper boots. And even though I did miss that gap, I stayed pretty dry.
Come on, though. That's dodging. That's dodging the right. Tell us a time that you've been really just caught in it.
I think the worst one was probably our trip over to Sheila's shakedown in February, which felt like it was winter, even though it was February and typically supposed to be very, very dry and warm. But there was absolutely freezing cold. There was sideways rain from the wind, and there were trucks that as they drove past would just splash up gigantic walls of water. And that was horrific and absolutely everything got soaked. I think we both had pretty good gear that kept the worst of it out and had hot showers and heaters for when the water and the cold did kind of get through. They helped quite a lot, but that's probably the worst.
Yep, and I would agree that those stretches of doing 110 or 100 to 110 k's an hour in driving rain with semi-trailers coming the other way on 2-lane roads, that was about as hard as it gets. So you have experienced some very ugly stuff, and you're still here and you're still riding, which is good.
Yes.
So 2 things we want to talk about today on this. The first is talking about your gear and some of the essentials of your gear and getting prepped for winter. And the second thing is about keeping your bike happy through the colder, wetter months.
Yeah. And, you can buy plenty of gear if, listener, if you're anything like me, a change of season is somewhat of an excuse to go and buy some new things. And there are some fantastic shops out there, particularly now online, that will stock really, really good quality gear for women and female riders. But we wanted to go through some of the essentials to consider. So if you have limited funds and just want to buy a couple of things to get you really ready to be able to ride, or just feel a little bit more confident if you do have to ride, these are our kind of top 5 essentials to be kind of ready to ride in winter. And we're going to work from 5 all the way up to number 1. So Mark, do you want to start? What's our number 5?
Yeah, starting at the least essential and working our way back to the top. A nice one that I use sometimes, which really can, particular on longer rides, help, is a neck sock. So most motorbike jackets you're going to have will get up to the base of your neck and keep everything nice and warm up to there. Your helmet will sort of go from the bottom of your chin up, but that little sort of bottom of the chin and top of the neck can get really quite arctically cold if you're out there doing longer rides in winter. And it's not just wet, that's also just protecting you from the cold. So really anything that helps you to keep the wind off your neck. I prefer to go for a neck sock rather than scarves, just because I used to use scarves when I was in my younger, sillier days, but it's more dicking around. You've got a chance that it's going to come undone. They're often bulkier, whereas for a few dollars, depending on where you get it from and what it is, you can pick yourself up a neck sock, slide it over your head before you pop your helmet on, tuck one end inside your jacket, and then the other the top end of it tuck underneath your chin strap to hold it in place, and then tuck it up underneath your chin. That will definitely help you keep the cold and wet off your neck, and it's an important place. Lots of important pipes go through your neck in terms of blood vessels and warming things up, so it's a good spot to keep warm.
I've seen them also referred to as gaiters, and I know you can get them for like camping and hiking, particularly really lightweight ones. I tend to wear them pretty much year round because I don't always like the feel of the wind on my neck, but that's more of a sensory thing. And also I had one time a bee fly down the collar of my jacket, and that freaked me out. And so now I feel like I've got just a really thin neck sock that helps reduce the likelihood of that happening, and they also just protect sun if you're riding in a bit more sunnier times. But you can get ones that are made out of like wool or a really light, thin like fleece, which can be really good. I know when I used to ride into work and have to be kind of semi-professional during the day, I would have the like merino wraps, and I'd wrap it underneath like over top of each other, kind of overlapping over my chest, but it would still come up under my neck. And so then I'd also have the wrap for being in the office during the day. And that seemed to work quite well. Also just having another layer on the chest to kind of keep you warm as well, kind of doing a bit of dual purpose there. But yeah, neck socks are for me absolutely a must, and very, very affordably priced.
Not a big investment to get one. So that's number 5.
Yeah, for sure. Number 4, wet weather pants. You can absolutely buy purposeful kind of waterproof riding pants that might have that kind of textile outer layer, which are particularly useful if you're doing like a lot of touring kind of riding or long distance riding. They could be great for that. But I think the thing that's going to be more affordably priced as an option to kind of get you through winter, if you are a bit restricted, are the kind of waterproof outer layer pants that go over top of your riding jeans or trousers. These are really great also just when it's cold. They act as a bit of a windbreaker. I know when I was riding really regularly, I would wear them pretty much every day. Because early morning, kind of in the evenings as well, it just keeps that cold wind off of your legs. And then if there was, some spots of rain, then they work really well as well. And then when you get to wherever you're going, they're really easy to just kind of take off and roll up and put in a backpack or a top box or something really nice and compact.
Spot on, spot on. Yep, I tend to keep mine in my top box or very close at hand wherever I'm riding during the winter months, because just as Kahiwa said, they're just so easy to chuck over the top and much cheaper. Pick up a pair for sort of around the 50 odd Aussie dollar mark as a sort of rough guide, and just to you will thank yourself the first time you hit an unexpected shower and whip them out and keep yourself very dry. So, yep, good point.
Yeah. And I've seen them with some really nice, like, reflective colours and bright colours.
Yep, reflective stripes
as well.
down the side
if
too.
You are, if you're riding in lower lights, so kind of early mornings or in the evenings, and wanting to make sure that you're visible, then these are also a really nice way to do that too. Bright colours, high vis, reflective kind of stripes, really good for that kind of safety aspect as well.
Good stuff.
Mark, number 3.
Number 3 now, this is starting to get a little bit more expensive, but if you are going to be doing some particularly rides where you need to get to your destination with dry feet, then a good set of wet weather boots is really, really important. Your feet are being so low and close to the road, you can expect that the lower you are on your body, the more water and crap you're going to have splashed up from the road surface as you're riding. And a good pair of really solid, waterproof as best as you can get wet weather boots is a very, very good investment. It does mean that if you're going to work or if you're going to somewhere else, then generally you'll be carrying a spare pair of shoes with you to change into. But for me, when the rain is either when the roads are very wet or when it's raining, then that's a far better option than trying to get a pair of one pair of shoes does everything. We'll talk more about gear in another episode, but there are shoes that you can sort of wear as casual shoes that are also motorbike shoes, but generally if it's going to be chucking it down, then they have their limitations. They're a real sort of compromise on keeping water out. So a good solid pair of wet weather boots will keep your feet warm and dry. And extremities, as we will find out in one of the last couple, are a very important thing. So that's number 3. Yes, you're starting to look at probably a couple of $100 worth, but you will not regret investing in a decent set of wet weather boots.
And they should last at least a fair few years as well. If you're looking after them and caring for them, they should last a couple of years. So it'll be a bit of an investment up front, but you'll be warm, you'll be safe, you'll be dry, and you'll have them for at least a couple of years.
I reckon mine are into
in the long run.
Mine are into their 4th winter, I think now, and it's possibly their last winter. But it's they're not going to wear out anytime soon. Number 2.
Number 2, layers.
Layers, donkey. Sorry.
Oh, I want to do the parfait quote, but I can't remember it enough off the top of my head, so we're going to skip that part. But layers, very important. I think one of the things that can be really useful when you're looking at buying a jacket up front are looking at jackets that have layers. So the dry rider jackets that I have, so they're textile outer layers, but they have zip out kind of warmer layers on the inside. So they will span a couple of seasons. And so the winter one that I have is pretty much kind of closed out, and it's got a really nice thick kind of insulated layer that I can zip out or zip back in. But the other thing that I tend to do is just lots of thinner layers. So even if you only have one jacket, something like merino or those kind of heat tech kind of layers are going to help keep you warm, particularly in your chest. So a good quality jacket will have really good insulation and protection against the wind kind of rushing against your chest, but it can be really important to keep warm through there. So lots of layers, lightweight, kind of thin you can get, merino layers or those other kind of layers as well. And then they'll also kind of keep you warm. And then if it gets warmer, they're really lightweight to kind of take off and put in a backpack or something similar. Not going to take up too much bulk under your jackets either.
Good point. All good points.
I've even done the same thing under my riding jeans when it was really cold, wearing, I think, when we did the Sheila's Shakedown ride or ride over to there, I was wearing a layer of the compression tights underneath my riding trousers.
Absolutely.
So another layer of warmth. But that compression was also really good just to help keep the blood flowing in the cold and when you're not moving too much. And other times I've worn like merino thermal layers underneath trousers as well, just to be extra warm. But I am cold-blooded, so I feel the temperature variations a lot more than you do, Mark. What are your kind of go-to layers?
In I think the compression tights on the lower body, if it's going to be particularly cold, is definitely one that I will do if I'm going for a longer ride. Up top, yep, as you've said, you don't need to have half a dozen different jackets for every different temperature range. If you can buy one jacket that's got a couple of linings, that's great. And then underneath that, one thing I will very often wear is a sleeveless vest because it gives me an extra layer on my chest without making my arms sort of get bulked out like a Michelin man and end up feeling, sort of bulky and restricted in the arm area. So I try and probably put more of a focus on just keeping my chest warm, because if my chest is warm, then I'm usually okay. So yeah, thin sleeveless vest is another one that can be handy.
Yep. When you did Adventure Ride, you had a layer with a hood, and you had the hood under your helmet just to get that extra layer through the kind of head and neck area as well.
Yeah, yep. I'm fortunate because I shave my head. So, fortunate or unfortunate, I kind of curse anybody that has hair, just in general. But yeah, hair does definitely keep your head warmer under a helmet. And if you don't have any, like me, then it was just a very lightweight, like a Kathmandu hiking top type thing that had the hood, but it was a very thin hood, so I could fit it in my helmet without adding a whole lot of bulk in there, without sort of pushing the thing out of shape or, putting massive pressure on my head, but just another layer to try and keep the warmth in. And that definitely did help as well.
Yeah, cool.
Which I think brings us to number one. Now, I get gobsmacked even in summer when I see people riding around on a motorbike without any gloves on. On the rare occasion, I know, I just don't get it. When you're as a human, when you fall off, then odds are you will put your hands out to save yourself. And when I see people without gloves, it just sort of makes me, it gives me butterflies thinking, my God, when you come off, the skin grafts you're going to have, it's just going to be awful. And then when I see them in winter, it's even more, not just because of the damage, but also because so much as a motorcyclist is dependent on fine motor skills in your fingers and being able to, in a very delicate, nuanced way, be able to balance your throttle and your clutch and your front brake. All of those things that require your pinkies to be working as well as you can possibly get them. Riding around in the rain, not only is it making them slippery, but it's also going to make them cold. It's going to make it harder to feel anything more than a few Ks. And if you can't feel your fingers, then you are losing so much in the way of your ability to control the motorbike. So for God's sake, if it's coming up to winter, find a pair. If you buy one thing, at least get some warm gloves. And I hear people sort of saying, oh yeah, but I don't get as much feel, and yeah, they're bulkier and they're hard. And yeah, they are, but that's still going to be better than riding with lightweight gloves that are not designed for riding in the rain. They get cold, your fingers get stiff, they start to lose their feeling, and it's just a bad idea. You go and find some good quality winter gauntlets that will keep your fingers warm. If you really want to, shine everyone on about how nice and warm your hands are, you can buy heated gloves. They are one of the most magnificent things that you will ever find on a winter's day, but they're also several $100s, so they are getting a bit extravagant. For the sake of $100 odd dollars, you can buy yourself a very nice set of winter gloves, thick gauntlets that will be water resistant. I won't say waterproof, but strongly water resistant up to a point. They will insulate your fingers from the cold and from the wet. And if you can keep your hands dry, then it's just such an important thing on keeping the rest of you dry. Whereas if your hands start getting cold, then that is the thin end of the wedge of just a downhill slide to freezing your ass off when you're riding, which is not fun.
It's really, really not. And I know I'm one of the people who says when I first kind of start wearing the gauntlets in the colder months, and I'm like, I don't feel like I can, have that same level of dexterity to feel through like the clutch and the front brake. Yep. But you do get used to it. And I will say, having ridden in just like leather gloves or more kind of summer gloves, the amount of dexterity and control and feeling I lose in my fingers when they're cold is way worse than what it feels like when you're wearing gauntlets, and they just take a little bit more to get used to.
Yep, they do.
And the bonus of the gauntlets is at least the ones that I've got, they've got almost like a little built-in windshield wiper to help, brush off the water from your visor, which is absolute godsend. Not so useful when you are having walls of water come at your face, but if it's just rain,
just little showers.
They're pretty effective, actually.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
So that's the gear, our top 5. And not to say that there's a bunch of other options. There's definitely winter-specific items that you can buy. But assuming you've got limited funds, what are the top 5 things that if you had to invest in something, what should you invest in to be able to ride in the winter? Those things there. And if you think that we've missed anything essential, please leave us a comment, Instagram or YouTube, or flick us an email. We're all good. But Mark, what about the bike? What can we be doing with our bike to kind of gear up and get ready for riding in winter?
Yep. So I already mentioned that coming into winter, if you're going to be riding it through winter, can actually be a good time to get it serviced, because it is making sure that it's in good shape and all of the important things are all working as they are. Let's say you've done that, your bike's in good working order, and then you're coming into 3 months, as we are, coming into 3 months of rubbish weather. Probably, so we've gone through the pre-ride checks and we've started talking about basic maintenance. Probably the number one thing that is going to be just more frequent during winter is going to be chain maintenance. So I mentioned earlier that your feet are low down and they're going to get a lot of water and crud from the road sprayed up on them, and your chain is in exactly the same boat. So your chain, being wet and dirty is going to wash the chain loop off it. That means it's going to be prone to rust. It means it's going to start wearing your sprockets prematurely. It's going to start stretching the chain prematurely. And as we talked about in a previous episode, swapping out a chain and both of your sprockets is probably going to be about $400 to $500, depending on what bike you're on. And it is something that, yes, it takes a little bit of effort to do it, to make sure it is kept clean and in good nick, but it's going to save you quite a few $100s when you can double or triple the length of the lifespan of your chain and sprockets. So as a rough guide, and this is purely indicative, your mileage may vary, but if it's summer, then if I was riding a bike every day, I'd probably clean the chain, give it a proper clean every 4 to 6 weeks. If it is winter, then I'm probably looking at every more like 2 to 3 weeks. If it's a bike that I'm riding, five days a week during winter to go to work and back, then the reality is you need to be giving it a clean every couple of weeks. Otherwise, it's gonna be toast very quickly, and you'll be in and paying a few $100 for some new ones. So, chain maintenance. I'll stop now. Kahiwa, next one.
Next one is thinking about batteries. So one of the things that can happen during the winter months is we might ride our bikes a little less, and hopefully if you've got the right gear, you might feel inspired or prepared to kind of get out there a little bit more often. But the downside of this is that the cold weather in particular, but also kind of lack of use, can really kill and drain your batteries. So two kind of quick options. One is to make sure you're starting and running the bike regularly, and even if it's just to kind of take it out for a bit of a blat in the couple of minutes where the sun's out or the rain is paused for a little while, that can be really helpful. Or you can look at things like a trickle charger, which I think we've spoken about in a previous episode. To just connect your battery up to give it just a little bit of charge over a longer period of time, to make sure that it doesn't go completely flat. So that can be really important. I feel like that's a good excuse to at least kind of try and get out at least a handful of times over the winter months, just to start the bike and get it running as well.
Yep, and the other thing I'll add in there is giving your bike a few runs during winter is good, just to keep everything moving. So bits are all moving. They're doing what they're meant to do. They're not just sitting there and gradually getting less and less in the way of lubrication and everything else that they need to keep happy. If you are somebody who lets their bike run out of registration, so you can't actually take it out during winter because you only register it maybe for 6 months of the year. I don't know, plenty of people do that. Then starting it up is good, even if you can't take it out on the road. If you do that, though, try and leave it running until the bike is nice and warm. So start it up and just let it run for 10 minutes. Give it a few revs along the way. That'll just get everything moving around inside the motor like it would if you were riding it regularly. One trap for young players is don't just start the engine, run it for 10 seconds and then turn it off, because you're actually putting more load on your battery. So your battery, it is drained of energy when you are cranking the bike over to get it started, and then it charges itself while the engine is running. So don't think that going out there every 2 days and just starting it and then switching it off after 10 seconds is helping. You're probably actually making it worse. When you do start it up and then just let it sit for 10 minutes, good chance to walk around the bike, check it out, make sure everything's check tire pressures, do all those things. Even if you're not taking the bike out, it's just a good chance to let it get up to normal operating temperature. So,
Nice.
Thank you, Kahiwa. Now, one more that I'll throw in, and this is the last one that I'll add, I think, is trying to keep or doing whatever you can, even though you are riding in winter, to keep your bike dry. So it sounds a bit dumb because you're consciously getting it wet because you're taking it out in winter and you know it's going to get caked. But when it's not doing that, then now when you get it home, I mean, cleaning, I've talked about cleaning your chain, but also cleaning your bike fairly regularly, but trying to keep it so after you've been for a ride, if it's not too gungy, at least try and maybe give it a wipe down. If it's particularly dirty, give it a clean and a wipe down and try and chamois as much of the water off as you can. If you are leaving it, if it has to live outside, even though it's undercover, if it has to live out in the elements and not locked in a shed or in your living room or bedroom, like I wish most of mine could, then buy yourself a bike cover. Again, you're looking at $50 to $100 for a bike cover. Do whatever you can to try and keep as much of the weather off of it. I don't know, we talked about this when it was possibly either I think looking after bikes or buying secondhand bikes, or looking after your bike and stopping it becoming really secondhand. This is all a part of that, to try and, even if you are riding it through the wettest of the wet, do whatever little things you can to try and keep it to try and keep it as dry as you can, because the more that you have, particularly the more that you have water pooling on any spots of your bike, that is when you will start to get rusty bolts, little spots of rust, because the water's just been sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it can trash a bike pretty quickly if you're not on top of it. So do whatever you can to keep your bike as dry as you can, even though you're riding it in the wet. Kahiwa.
Yes. And I think similarly, thinking about your helmet as well. So when you're out and about, it can be getting covered in rain and mud and gunk as well. So similarly, trying to keep that clean and dry. I think this is really, really important if you're riding in kind of dark or kind of rainy weather. Keeping your visor clean means this is going to help the water be able to run off and keep your visibility really high, so that you can actually see. And the ideal way to do this is with some kind of water repellent. So we use Plexus, which is just a really thin spray.
We are not sponsored by Plexus. We just like it.
Not sponsored. That's just what we use. Which you spray on and then wipe off, and it cleans it, but also adds a layer of water repellent to the surface as well. So it means that the water beads, and it's easier to just kind of wipe off with said kind of finger on your gauntlets if you're wearing those. And that's really, really helpful. I think for me, one of the things that I love about my helmet is that it has an internal shade visor. And so I actually find sometimes when I'm riding in kind of early mornings or when there's kind of rain on the road, it can be really reflective if there's any sun then. And so sometimes I want to be able to use the shade visor even in winter, but you don't want to be using that if you're then potentially going to be going into rain or low visibility times either. So personally, that's why I love my helmet. But if not, making sure that you've got your visor that's really clear, it's clean, and able to get the water off that really easily.
And just one final thing in there, cleaning inside and out. So it is a really good idea. Work out how your visor comes off your helmet. Most of them these days have quick release little quick release levers or similar mechanisms that let you take your visor off pretty easily. If you are, I think the best time to do it is after a ride, because then take it off, give it a proper clean, get it really, really as clear as you can get it, and with whatever your choice of plastic cleaner on the outside. And then when you jump on it the next time, it's just one less thing that you have to think about when you go to get on your bike the next time, so you're prepared. And having it done on the inside, if you're riding in heavy rain, you will find that sometimes a little bit of rain will get on the inside of your visor. You will find that your condensation from your breath will fog up your visor sometimes as well. So having those water repellents, anything that you can put onto your visor that keeps it clean and stops water from wanting to attach to it, is going to make it easier in a time when you're riding in the rain. That is more challenging. It's harder riding in the rain. We'll do that another episode, but anything you can do to make your life easier by good preparation when you are riding is really important. So
absolutely.
Takeaways, Kahiwa.
Cool. Yeah. So in terms of getting ready or gearing up to ride in winter, so we've got the gear, what we think of the top 5 essentials to keep the warmth in and the cold and wet out. So thinking about some kind of neck sock or gaiter. Overpants can be really useful. You can just put them over top of your normal riding jeans or pants. Proper wet weather boots that are usually got some kind of fleece or some kind of warm layer on the inside, nice and thick waterproofing or water resistant leather on the outside. Thinking about layers underneath your jacket rather than necessarily having to buy a separate jacket, and in particular prioritizing layers over your chest where the kind of air kind of might hit you as you're riding. And number one, if you buy nothing else this winter, let it please be
Decent set of gloves.
Wet weather, decent set of gloves. And in the winter ones, the ones that we've seen that we use are referred to as gauntlets. Really nice, big, thick fingers, and the wrists kind of go all the way up, like almost halfway up your forearm. So they keep it nice and warm. They're really, really good. Thinking about your bike, what we're trying to do is keep it in good shape. So this will help prevent any issues happening and also kind of lessen their impact if they do. It'll keep your ride really nice and smooth, even as the conditions might change around you. So first of all, really important, keeping your bike maintained. So thinking about your servicing, and in particular, thinking about your chain maintenance schedule, that you might need to do that a little bit more regularly through the winter months or rainy, wet months than you might through drier summer months. Thinking about your battery, keeping that charged either by starting and running, actually going for a ride, or thinking about a trickle charger. Trying to keep the bike as dry as possible when you are not riding it or after a ride. And this is going to help reduce chances of water getting into places where the bike doesn't necessarily want it to be. And the big thing is around keeping that visor clean and clear, and where possible, thinking about using something to increase the water repellent so that it'll just help you have a nice smooth ride when you are actually out.
Cool.
So, Mark,
Next episode. Well, I think following on from this, like we've talked about getting your gear and getting the bike all prepped and ready to go for winter. But let's face it, here in Adelaide, we've got another 2.5 at least months of really shitty weather coming at us. So it's probably, I think we'll keep the winter vibes going. And next one, I think we'll talk a little bit about riding in the wet, some of the things to consider, and we'll go from there.
And keep an eye out on our Instagram and YouTube shorts. We've got a few little videos, get ready with me videos, where I'll show you the gear that I've been wearing for our rides the last couple of weeks. Just to show a bit of the difference between a ride on a day where it was a bit warmer and sunny, and a ride where it was quite cool but still actually really nice. So still a really nice afternoon for a ride. But until next time, please ride safe and have fun. Beyond the Pillion is brought to you by Kahiwa Sebire and Mark Drechsler, and with the support of Women Moto, the online magazine for women motorcyclists. Go to womenmoto.com. If you like today's episode, please remember to rate, review and subscribe, and tell a friend. It helps others find the podcast.